Thank you. If I could just pick up on that, I'm sorry, but I did think that Judge Carlton's order required that people who were mentally ill would not be placed in solitary confinement or administrative segregation.
So the order actually requires a change in the conditions of confinement. The way the order is written, we really were faced with either certainly not putting anybody in or changing the conditions in such a way that it made it palatable and livable. And that's why, as you look at the way the plan is written, and then the orders actually on the 11th of August and on the 29th of August, indeed modify the original 410 order to approve the changes that were proposed. So the court understood and accepted the proposals that we made, acknowledging that they were so significant that they changed the conditions of confinement enough to cure the violation that the court had identified.
Okay, thank you. Additional comments from the public?
Yeah, hi. My name is Deirdre Wilson. I'm a member of California Coalition for Women Prisoners and a former prisoner myself. I did 3 years at CIW and have firsthand experience of what it's really like to be there, what it's like to experience the overwhelming stresses that most people who come into prison are bringing from having experienced traumatic backgrounds for the most part, and just the overwhelming mental health stresses of being there. We're not really scratching the surface on how inadequate the whole environment is for the people who are actually there, and how the increase in the overcrowding it's a crisis. What's going on is really a crisis level, and I understand we have to deal with statistics and processes, but people are really dying and killing themselves, and medical, it's not like we can put in box, here's a medical situation, here's a mental health situation. If you have a mental health situation, you go here and you get this treatment. They're all impacting each other. And the whole, let me just read an example of just one story of one person that we have received. Her name is Geraldine Quinton. She's a 64-year-old woman and longtime mental health services consumer. Geraldine spent almost 3 years in the CIW SHU for enemy concerns. She was a target for harassment on the yard because of her mental illness and felt very unsafe. She was transferred from the SHU to the SCU in August 2013, so this is fairly recent, 2013, after multiple suicide attempts. Geraldine finally feels safe in the SCU, where she receives multiple forms of treatment, groups, more regular clinician visits, though her medications are still constantly changing. She almost died from an overdose of prescribed lithium in 2014, when her lithium blood levels were not being monitored. Her medications are still being adjusted to find the right combination. However, in spite of unstable meds, Geraldine has been told she will be moved out to general population in the next 90 days. She's afraid of going back into general population. Other mental health services consumers in general population note that they rarely see a clinician, that clinicians are constantly changing, and that meds are the only treatment available. So we have a much bigger problem than what then any little thing that we can do is way not enough and needs to be done. We need to do whatever can be done to really overhaul the system.
One step at a time.
I know.
And thank you.
I know. I'm just trying to give an idea of what real people's lives are.
Think you very much. Thank you. Okay. As I said, I think we're going to hold this item open. And thank you very much for being here.
Madam Chair,
Comment.
Yeah, I had some, I think we should expand our look at alternatives to what you're proposing in the budget proposal. And yes, I hear your base budget approach where you just look at, okay, here's the money and we have to add this. And so we don't change anything that we already have in there right now, but we just add money to this thing. And I'm concerned that it's going to be a pattern that's going to continue every fiscal year. We're going to just keep adding programs and things like that. But I think that we have to maybe take a step back and start looking at community-based options, like various community-based alternatives. And we have some laws already on the books that we could do that. Senator Liu has a bill that she's now going through the process that deals with mental health and inmates that have mental health issues, Senator Liu's bill. So I think other options are available. I'd like to see some other options explored rather than what's proposed here in the budget. I think this is going to become very expensive, and it appears to be very expensive, and I'm concerned about the cost, and just I don't see the end of the tunnel, the light at the end of the tunnel. I don't see it. So I think we have to start looking at some different options than what you are proposing. Thank you.
I think that there are many members of the legislature and this committee that are concerned about that and how we get a different approach. Some people say culture change, so that we have a more better way of assessing people when they come in, dealing with the fact that our prisons have in many ways become our new mental hospitals, and how we deal with people front end so they don't decompensate and become more stressed when they're incarcerated, and how we add options so that since most people will be returning to the community, they will be able to return and make a successful reentry. So we will be looking at that and would just welcome being able to partner with the Department of Finance and CDCR and trying to consider what those things might be. But thank you guys very much for being here. And we're going to move to issue number 4, which relates to the conditions for condemned inmates at San Quentin. Department walk through the budget proposal.
Okay, Jason Lopez, Deputy Director of Fiscal Services for the department. So this particular issue actually has 2 proposals that the department is coming forward with, both of which are related to our condemned population at San Quentin State Prison. The first is our Donner Housing Unit conversion. In this request, we're looking for $3.2 million in 24.3 positions in budget year. That includes about $300,000 in one-time costs. So in budget year and ongoing, the request is $2.9 million in 24.3 positions. These resources are related to converting 2 tiers of the Donner Housing Unit to a condemned housing unit. The conversion will add 97 condemned inmate beds to the 690 the department is currently funded to run. That'll bring our total to 787. Total condemned men population, last time I looked at least, was at 729. Given the historical trends that we've seen in the department, we're expecting about 20 additional condemned inmates per year. However, that is partially offset by the fact that we see some sentences overturned, and we also see some deaths within the population. So historically, we've seen a growth of about 13 condemned inmates per year. I'm joined by Mr. Ralph Diaz and Mr. Ron Davis from our Division of Adult Institutions to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you. LAO, do you have any comments? Department of Finance, any comments? Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve as budgeted. Oh, are there public, did I ask for public comment? Public comment. It's been moved. Please read the roll.
Madam Chair,
Aye.
Senator Anderson, Senator Bell.
We'll hold the roll open for Senator Bell. Okay, we are moving on to item number 5, which is an update from the OIG on sensitive needs yards. Okay, so I'm going to ask if you don't mind having the OIG come up and walk us through his findings and recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bob Barton, Inspector General. I believe staff's done a good job of summarizing what our report highlights in this area and the concerns that we have and have raised to the department in our last 2 reports. Again, we were wanting to be clear that the point we were making was not an increase overall in homicides. In fact, there had been a decrease, but what we saw is a disproportionate amount of that violence occurring on sensitive needs yards, the very yards where people are going who have safety needs in the first place. And our belief that those populations have changed and become more sophisticated, more violent, more mixed, if you will, and might require analysis by the department of perhaps ways to make those safer. And so with that, we have had initial discussions with administrators within the department, but have, as of yet, not really been given a corrective action plan or any follow-up on specific measures that are going to be taken. So with that, I know Mr. Diaz remained up here, and perhaps the questions that the committee had, he can answer.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Ralph Diaz, Acting Deputy Director, Division of Adult Institutions Facility Operations. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee. In reading Mr. Barton's, the OIG's report, just to, if you'd like a quick overview, or you just want me to address the 2 questions?
We're really interested in what steps the department is planning to take to reduce the violence in sensitive needs yards.
Okay. As a general overview, what most of the homicides that were occurring and that we addressed from the OIG report were occurring within cells. In-cell homicides are a grave concern for any institution, sensitive needs, general population, or SHU. The recommendation from the OIG was that we examine the use of a compatibility chrono similar to we use in the restricted housing unit, SHU or ADSEG, where the cellmates marry up and they acknowledge that they're good to live together. They acknowledge that. Currently, that practice is only in our general in our restricted housing, SHU and ADSEG. The same process occurs in a different way in the general populations and in the SHU via the classification process. The classification process, when an inmate comes before a committee, the committee reviews all case factors of the inmates, from the commitment offense to the time to serve to his institutional disciplinary history, to include anything that may be viewed as predatory. In-cell sexual assaults, in-cell batteries, in-cell homicides, things like that. If that particular inmate meets those criteria, or the committee deems them a predator, or that the committee has concerns that they shouldn't have a cellmate because their behavior indicates that they could get violent within the cell, the committee has the option and the ability to designate them a single cell. And they are S suffix and they don't live with anyone else. It is the department's expectation that all inmates do accept assigned cell housing. One of the recommendations within the OIG report is that within the classification process that we need to really examine how we articulate a placement of inmates from single cell back to double cell or vice versa. We do acknowledge that some documentation does need more beefing up, lack of a better term. We need to articulate better why we're placing someone back on double cell based on the committee's recommendation. That is something we will be addressing with our counselors, our classification staff, and institutions to get a better documentation in those 128Gs. We did assemble a warden's advisory group to take a look at the recommendation of developing or extending the restricted housing chronos to the general populations. The concept was in a general population and a sensitive needs yards, the inmates do have access in and out of the cell. They do have opportunity to express, I can't get along with my cellmate here, so there is that opportunity for them to seek another housing. In restricted housing, that does occur, but they don't come out as often as your general population inmates. We did view that just due to the amount of movement that occurs within the general population and what is required for those reviews, it would be cumbersome, and we did not believe that we could appropriately manage that. But we do believe that even within our classification processes, we do look for inmates who we feel should not be selling with others, and we give them single cells. That goes across for general population, sensitive needs, SHU, ADSEG. We can give that S suffix designation.
Okay, I hear you saying that you think the classification system is enough for screening cellmates and other things. I would simply point out, obviously it isn't, because we're having homicides, right? And a lot of them are in sensitive needs yards. So am I assuming that you are going to put the compatibility form back into the sensitive needs yards as the OIG suggested?
The compatibility forms were never a part of general population or sensitive needs housing.
They were not, but now we're having homicides. So there's been a recommendation. You're saying the department has rejected the recommendation.
The department felt that the classification process can appropriately address housing concerns, and that even if a document where both inmates sign that they house together doesn't mean that something violent couldn't occur either.
That's right. It would just maybe make it a little less likely. Okay, this is an oversight item. I have no other questions, but I'm amazed that when we're getting all these requests for more money and more staff and more everything, it doesn't occur to us that maybe a simple procedure that is used already in other parts of the system would not be appropriate here. No comment. LAO, do you have any comments? Department of Finance. You think it would be too cumbersome and too difficult and too expensive to use the compatibility form that's used in segregated housing and putting it for sensitive needs yards, given the fact that many of the homicides are occurring in sensitive needs yards?
Josh Geiger, Department of Finance. We don't currently have a proposal on it. As you know, we'd have to work with the department to better understand the cumbersome process and what resources would be required to resolve it. But we haven't reviewed this issue at this time.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the subcommittee? Any comments from the public?
Jim Lindberg on behalf of the Friends Committee on Legislation of California. I just wanted to point out the comments on page 26 of the analysis where it talks about the need for positive incentives within security housing units. And we wholeheartedly agree with this. In 2010, through a budget trailer bill, eligibility for earning good time credits for people housed in segregated housing units was taken away without any justification or any, we're unable to determine why. And there are several proposals in the legislature this year that would restore eligibility for earning good time credits, and we think we have to have carrots. It can't all just be sticks. So thank you.
Thank you. That's actually item number 6, but we'll be ready to move there in a minute. You know, this is an oversight item. It is, no action is necessary at this time, but I would like to have the department consider reinstituting or putting in the compatibility forms in sensitive needs yards before we act on the final budget, or explaining to the committee why it is too cumbersome and difficult and to do or expensive. Because on the face of it, it seems like this might be a little piece of something we could do that wouldn't actually be too cumbersome or expensive and could lead to some of the changes that might make these safer places to be for the inmates. Okay, moving on to item number 6, which is the OIG update on the segregated housing units.
And again, there's quite, Madam Chairman, there's quite a lengthy discussion of that within the agenda items here, all the way starting back, as the gentleman mentioned, on page 26, going through what the step-down program is, quoting our report in terms of the statistics that we found. We look at things such as how long is it taking the department to get through all of those persons that were originally housed in segregated housing, as well as how effective the measures that they're now implementing to step people out of those programs have been, and whether or not there are things that can be done to improve that. And then I see also sort of attached to that a reference to our authorized review of the CIW SHU inmates. Those are the female that were held in segregated housing for enemy concerns. It's slightly a different question, but in terms of the first issue, what we found was that while the department is diligently working with the resources they've got trained at this point, if they stayed on the pace they're currently on, it would take until 2019 to do those reviews. It's my understanding, and I'll let the department speak to this, that they have plans to add to those resources. So that was one concern, was that how long it is taking. And then secondly was the rate at which people are stepping down. And I have to say that encouraging to find that there is a large percentage that are using this process and are being stepped out of segregated housing. The statistics show that the closer they get to that final level of going back out to GP, the more likely they are to progress. There is a portion that I really am not sure the department can do anything with because they're just refusing, and then there's a portion that have, for lack of a better term, been retained on steps, and those are the ones that, if the committee recalls, were being addressed in legislation I think proposed last year in SB 892, and as a result, the department instead took on the task of hiring, I believe it's 10, I don't know exactly what they're calling them, but I think they act in the role of counselors in this programming process to assist those folks, especially the ones that perhaps are having difficulties not moving on in their programming. So again, we're talking about just at the SHU location, so Pelican Bay, Corcoran, Tehachapi, and they're being assigned, as I understand it, I have yet to, I've not yet been able to go out and actually watch them in person and see what their communications and interactions are with the inmates, but there was a recent article in the CDCR news that actually introduced the people and gave a picture of them, and as I understand it, that's what they're being tasked with, is helping all of these inmates who are in the step-down process to work those programs successfully. So that, as I said, is a good thing and a positive note, and we won't know probably until our next year's report how successful those people are at doing that, and we will certainly keep track of that and report back to the committee. And then as for the female situation, we have visited the alternative housing location at Chowchilla. It had some limitations in that it could only house 16 of the women. My understanding is that they're basically full. And also I saw and just learned recently that they are looking at another location at CIW as an alternative housing for those women who otherwise are locked up basically because of their safety concerns. So with that, I again will, I'm assuming Mr. Diaz is still going to address those.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Morton. The case-by-case reviews, we did recognize that they weren't progressing as fast as we would like. We did add additional wardens to conduct the case-by-case reviews, along with an additional associate director, and mainly concentrate those two wardens and the associate director, their efforts at Corcoran and at Tehachapi, and focus the more complex cases with Mr. Gerbino and Ms. Hubbard at Pelican Bay, which they've been there the last 2 weeks. We are seeing quite a bit of success within the step-down program since the beginning of it, where there was some reluctance by the inmates to participate. Either was they were waiting, it was kind of a wait and see to see if we were going to come with the case-by-cases and provide the privileges that we say that we were going to provide. I am happy to say that we, with the help of the Division of Rehabilitative Programs and the facilitators, CC2 facilitators that were assigned to these institutions, they're able to communicate this better. They're able to have more one-on-one with the inmate to encourage them to participate. With those efforts, we have seen more participation of the inmates within the programs themselves, which then helps them facilitate through and get through the steps. Step 4, inmates at Tehachapi, they are experiencing the benefits of yard 3 times per week integrated amongst all themselves, day rooms twice a week, out-of-cell feeding, unrestrained movement, more out-of-cell time within that program in Step 4. So we are getting good reports of that, and with those good reports, it's encouraging the other men to participate in the STEP program, which helps us facilitate them through the program at a faster rate and have less inmates regress back or fail to participate, so they remain in their current step. So it is our desire to get through these inmates, trying to finish off our case-by-case reviews. The goal was December of this year. We're working very hard to try and get there. We have remaining at Pelican Bay 849 inmates to review on the case-by-case at Pelican Bay, and that's where we're really concentrating to get those inmates in a step and either through those steps and off to either Corcoran or Tehachapi to finish off the step-down programs. The classification training that have been received by the STG counselors at the institution, the motivational interviewing has also assisted the inmates and the staff to security threat group counselors. They're the counselors that actually work up the case for the departmental review boards. I'm sorry.
And you use the word counselors?
Counselors, yes.
Yeah, so these are, what are these people?
They're correctional counselors that work up
Okay.
cases in preparation for committees.
So they're basically CCPOA, as I understand.
Rank and file
the class-
peace officers, yes. Yes,
Okay,
peace
thank
officers.
you.
Yes.
Thank you. Did they get special training for this?
Yes, they did. They received security threat group training on the departmental review board cases, how to prep them for review.
Right, and how many hours was the training?
Madam Chair, I'd have to check. I want to say on the onset, this training occurred back in October of 2012. I'd have to get back to you on that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Just continue.
No, I think that's it, Madam Chair. Just again, we're highly encouraged to seeing the progress of the STG step-down program. And we're, with the inmates participating more in it and us meeting some of our commitments and seeing inmates, provided them with opportunities to get in front of not only interacting with themselves out of cell, but also in front of groups provided through the Division of Rehabilitative Programs, group sessions amongst all the different groups. So they're getting out, and we receive very good feedback that the inmates have participated in programs that they haven't done for many years, and the communication has been very open and very positive.
Thank you. Does the LAO have any comments? Finance?
This actually, Madam Chair, crosses over onto issue 9, because one of the questions that came out of this that I'm reading here is what's happening with the CIW shoe, and item number 9 is for the activation of CIW Walker Building.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding, and I may be wrong here, but I was told in a separate conversation that that's being looked at as a place to put those female offenders.
Yeah, it is, and we will take that up
Okay.
when it comes up. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you very much. And this is an oversight item. I do, since we have you here, Mr. Diaz, do have some general questions. I'm glad, very glad, that the step-down program was initiated and that it's moving forward. I do have some questions around the process for offering rehabilitation programs, which is one of the recommendations, literacy, GED, college courses
Correct.
for those who are longer than 3 months. How is that coming?